Welcome to the Lifelong Love and Complete Maturation on the Ensouled Body teaching series with Dr. Stuart Sovatsky. I'm Michael Ostrolenk, and I'm your host. These will be a series of short talks and dialogues with Stuart on his 50 years of lifelong love work. Today's first talk is entitled Family Life as a Spiritual Practice. Over to you, Stuart.
Good day to everyone. Thanks for tuning in. My topic of the spiritual path of family is going to begin with when a couple become a family, is when they basically there's a pregnancy. When we're in a family way, as they used to put it, when you're in a family way, that's the beginning of a new family. And of course, all of our couples are based in families from which they came, that are based in families and great grand ancestors. And we have to just mention that in the beginning, where did it all start? And we could say spirituality was a response to this mystery of ancestry. Even in the Old Testament, the beginning paragraphs are about who begat who, begat who, begat who. And it's good to sort of tap into that about family, of what is the source of life. Because spirituality has always been about the creator. And it's not going to be that simple for us to talk about the spirituality of being in a family way. And we could have at least a 5-10 minute podcast about the difficulties. But so I'll just hint at them. Then you may already be wondering how is this going to go? Because conception is not always or even often just a kind of a mystery. We have created the ability to plan for conception. And family planning is a new layer, not 100% new, but what I'm really going to be talking about is a beautiful concept. And we wonder how broadly it could become part of our natural reality. And that is to be aware of the moment of conception during a fertile intercourse that would feel what is happening. That in contrast to where sexuality is predominant and fertility is kind of being put to the side, if not prevented, how do we then be aware of the sensations of an intercourse in which conception is in the air and can happen and will happen and does happen? And what kind of language would we use to describe such an experience? We know about creating a beautiful meal for someone, and how grateful we are when someone make us a beautiful meal or even a birthday cake and a surprise party. It's completely joyful to walk into a room and there's a surprise party that springs out. But what about the birth itself? What about the conception? The conception itself. And if there were a way that lovemaking was of a different dimension, so that this is going to sound, you'll feel it. It's like, how can I even say this? But that intercourse was a fertility situation. And we will tap into in the next podcast the types of eroticism of pagan culture, and it's hidden in various tantric understandings of fertility, and we'll see that it's quite possible to be both sexually fulfilled and have sexual relations be highly attuned to fertility and not blocked whatsoever. Instead, the hormones flowing in the bodies of men and women would be filled with the sense of fertility, and in some new way that I'll talk about, and you can read about it in my publications, that this fertility becomes psychedelic. in its chemistry, becomes entheogenic in its impact on the couple. Chemistries of the source of life. This is what gives the potency to the entheogenic hormones, the oxytocin, the estrogen, the testosterone. These are hormones that have much more psychological impact, not just physiological impact, and because they're connected with the creation of life. So what we're talking about first is the origin of family being experienced as a miracle of creation, and that all 9 months are experienced as a continuation of this moment. And then birth and every day of the child's life is witnessed as an unfolding of that original moment when the parents were like God and Goddess. We're like, you know, in a horror movie, it would be creating life. In the Frankenstein movie, you see this being created in the laboratory. But in this romantic environment, it's a tremendous power, and it's not completely unexperienced. There are many accounts of conscious conception, but then it persists. So this could arguably, and this is what I did my marriage therapy based on, not that we had couples like what I'm describing, but the power of the couple's bond, particularly if they've created life, has enough innate power to make divorce obsolete, to make the difficulties that come up in marriage become completely obsolete, because there's so much positivity that's underexplored, moods of awe, and it really requires what I'm sharing on my podcast is it's both new and old understanding of marriage and family. That family was a religious experience to create the life, to nurture and bear the child. And then, of course, at some point, these children grow up, they have children, and they make their parents into grandparents. And likewise, they make the grandparents into great-grandparents. And then all the ancestors, which is worth saying, that are deceased, in some lineage way, every time a child is born into their lineage, they move up one more grand. So it's a living ripple effect. We don't live in this cosmos, but it is completely logical to want to and to have it be mapped out, that the birth of a child ripples back in time infinitely by furthering the lineage that goes back hundreds or thousands of generations. And also it creates the potential for that little baby to be fertile, to have children who will have children. And 25 years later, those children's children will have children. So there's really no such thing as just the birth of a child that is isolated. The birth of the child immediately makes people into parents. You could adopt, and that is a special topic that we could speak quite beautifully about. But here, as soon as you become a parent, it could be at the moment of conception. Many people experience it. And like I say, we have to free up any kind of political concerns about the status of the zygote, so that it becomes completely lifted out of the politics of fertility completely. That'll take even more time to try to do. But I'm pointing to that we have the ways and the means for this to happen. The type of eroticism exists that would please many people. So once that's freed up, and you're experiencing the conception as a miracle, and every day of the child's birth in life is a miracle, their own puberty at age 13 is tears are rolling down the eyes of everyone when their son or daughter is becoming fertile. And then the marriage, which is commonly makes everybody all very heart opened, and particularly parents, really, when they see this happening. And then the children start coming, and the grandchildren, and the whole life unfolds. So in this first podcast, I'm wanting to try to sketch out the deep version of family. Freud, none of the psychologies that I know describe the deep, we call it deep ecology. We have a concept of deep ecology, which is to feel the oneness of the planetary life. We've done a much better job with every other animal and plant species than we have about the human species for reasons, political reasons. But be that as it may, this deep family is what I'm sharing with you. The deep mystery of perpetual procreative lineage forward in time, potentially infinitely into the future. And we are also, each of us, the growing tip of a lineage that extends back infinitely. Perhaps we would have to name a god, goddess somewhere at the beginning. And so within this roughed out, just sketched out, deep family, maybe I want to keep emphasizing, what I'm sharing with you is the not family, but the deep perception of what family is that's been lost. Not 100% lost, but we want to reawaken it and deepen the awakening because of the ramifications. I believe juvenile crime would be over. I believe that most all of teenage addictions and adult addictions would be over because the high, the hormonal high in the body is much stronger than any substance you could take from the outside. It would seem completely irrelevant. So, and then, as I say, juvenile acting out. Why so? Because the harmony of the family would be so great. Why divorce would go away? Because you look at your partner and you weep immediately at what each other gave each other in creating family. Everything I've just shared with you is completely absent, 100% absent from Freudian thought, from, I believe, even Jungian thought, and probably any other psychologist you could imagine. And it's sort of left over in the Catholic religion or something, and they are have their own challenge of bringing this forward because of the limited knowledge they have about human sexuality compared to pagan fertility, spirituality, and the kind of tantra that I use that word, you know the word, that the aspects of tantra that relate with fertility, which are completely unknown. So I have a big project here. There's a lot of unknown about the spiritual eros. Michael has, we have other podcasts about that eros. But right now we're within that kind of eros. We're talking about this type of miracle experience of the conception, gestation, birth, and the whole rest of the life of the family to the point of them having children and making all the parents into grandparents. And within this highly enriched environment, the issues we struggle with, me too, the gender stress and strife becomes completely overwhelmed by the respect, the incredible respect that returns to men and women by imbuing them with this deep fertility. It all goes away. The insults, the violences against between men and women with that we live with, I believe that it arose. It became more and more powerful as fertility is a side effect. Nobody could have predicted it. Fertility was controlled as a good thing, but it's not often that the technology has no side effect that we have to worry about. Very rare. The car was a good thing for probably 150 or 75 years, and then pollution was noticed. So we're just saying that that this we need new information, and then suddenly this deep family emerges, and it displaces all the psychologies. This is a very big project to displace the trillions of dollars that have been spent on the psychoanalytic vision, much of which has fallen apart. But it still persists, the pathological family. The family is the source of all of our problems. Our parents is the source of all kinds of bad treatment. Most parents believed that their children were a miracle to them, even in ordinary times in the 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, you know, but somehow the psychology has a view that childhood causes our problems. That's a theory. and it has a self-fulfilling aspect to it. And there was no attempt to try to reveal the deep family that I'm talking about, which would have, and this has been my marriage therapy career, is revealing even little glimmers of the deep family. And people in one session, I just have to, and I'm not seeing clients, I'm not doing an advertisement. In one session, they're from the divorce to they're crying in each other's arms. That's how powerful deep family life can be.
Thank you, Stuart. Welcome back to part 2 of Family Life as a Spiritual Practice with Dr. Stuart Sovatsky.
Thank you again, Michael, and hello to everyone. In the last podcast that preceded this one, I spoke of a big picture of the deep family. I could call it the deep understanding of family, just like we could speak of deep ecology compared to ordinary ecology, which is not including a new way of looking at the oneness of nature. Ecology is looking at plants and animals and how they work together. Deep ecology is perceiving a kind of almost a consciousness that circulates through all of nature, and thereby we call it deep ecology. So please go back and listen to that first podcast for all the details, because now what I want to get into is the daily life aspect. The big picture is very, very important because we draw from it, but daily life is details of who made the meal, who stayed up and did homework with their son or daughter, who had to have a challenging conversation with a son or a daughter. How did the parents have to get on the same page? If they're on different pages, there's so many viewpoints, many aspects of certainly even just child rearing. Forget about also to include how the two parents, the two husband and wife, they want to treat each other. So I'm just going to give a very simple teaching or method on how the daily life activity of this deep family first can perpetuate and really be bulletproof. That a huge worry is lifted in couples in high school, for that matter, before they're even thinking about such things as marriage, if they can believe that it's a very easy and enjoyable matter to get married, and it'll last a whole lifetime. That alone, if I could get that thought across and back it up, which Michael is giving me the chance to do from my half a century of working with couples and families and kids and all kinds of lockup environments in the juvenile court, all kinds. It's not just lightweight, but very heavy situations where I kind of gathered this viewpoint that I'm sharing with you. So the core of remembering the deep family is part 1, which I spoke about before in a very brief way. Trying to live in that state of consciousness, and then spending roughly between 1/3 and 2/3 of the conversational time in your couple relationship talking about what I talked about in the first podcast, of feeling lucky to be chosen by your partner, to be a partner in family creation. And the goal of knowledge, I should say the sign of knowledge, is tears. And it's not tears of grief. In fact, psychology has very little interest in tears of joy. I don't think you'll find many books that go into the details. They mainly talk about grief and pain and trauma. It's very tragic that psychology, which is a name of the study of the soul, is really like a medical hospital approach. What's wrong and the tears of anguish. But so we find that there's a bad gap, that there was almost zero study of the kind of tears that I'm talking about, but they exist. So when you're saying to your partner, or you're hearing it from your partner, you hear it daily and daily, in and out, and it's not just information. Oh, you told me that yesterday. The main project is not becoming bored with repetition. That's what meditation really means. Meditation means you can watch your breath for 14 hours a day for a month. And you, instead of being bored, you become enlightened about the mystery of breath. Now, when I was teaching meditation in the like 1972, 73, I go back a little bit with 50 years is a while ago. People laughed when I would try to teach meditation. They'd say, there's nothing going on. It took a lot of teaching and workshops and books, thousands and probably billions of dollars, literally maybe trillions of dollars, to help people realize that sitting and just watching your breath over and over could be worthwhile. Well, a compliment is a little easier to take. It doesn't take as much, Spartan attention of just watching your breath in and out, rise and fall. So what I'm saying is every day, 30 to 50% of your conversation is about how lucky you feel, about the day you were married, about the first time you ever set eyes on each other and your heart just jumped out of your chest. And you refresh the story of your love story as the purpose of the English language. I'm going to let that sink in. What is the English language for? It's to glorify life. We use it to complain and go to therapies where they teach us how to get our complaints out. They rarely teach about how do you even have that much to compliment. You have to have a memory that remembers all the details of meeting each other and not forgetting it. And definitely have to have permission to repeat yourself that it's food. It's not information. It's golden food to talk about those memories, a memory of when the child was conceived, if we're now aware of that. And you felt shivers through your whole body. Kundalini is the name of the mother-father force, the force of the creation of the life, of the gestation. That's what Kundalini is active, actually, in all of us, is creating the body in the womb. And so we talk about it, and the Kundalini, the spinal energies are activated. You're talking about when your daughter or son was 6 months old and 1 year and 14, you're constantly talking. And then when you see the child, you're crying more. There he is now, he's 14 and 18. It's not that far removed. I'm just roughing out the ratio. If we can roughly, in a mundane way, talk like I'm just talking 20, 30% of the time, then life is completely different for those couples. And I have, like I say, 50 some years, how many? 30, 40,000 couples, people that I've had a chance to share this with in Russia, be it as in the Ukraine for that matter, in Germany, France, South Africa, India, very much, many times, where I created a 40-country world family conference. The Dalai Lama was involved. A lot of people got very interested in my view of family because it leads up to a one world family. Because if you love your family, and we got rid of the Freudian negation of family and pathology of family, and help families. I'm not saying they're all start out perfect. They start out, they're stumbling along. But to help them, they need to have a vision of the deep family that I shared. And then they're helped, and then it's so enjoyable to do it right. It's thousands of times more enjoyable to be a grateful, admiring family where 30% of the time you're either talking about the beginning memories or this morning's memories and gratitudes for simple things, making the home and sharing issues and solving problems together. The part two of solving problems is to always say, when a problem is raised, the listener always says, "Thank you for telling me." And then the first person says, "You're very welcome." I won't go into more detail, but that prevents uncivility and disrespect in which people become defensive, they fight back, and then these complaints never get solved. They get worse and worse because you can't even talk about them in a respectful way. Turns out respect is conveyed from a kindergarten level of communication. And it may seem trivial, that's part of the problem. How could something as trivial as saying, thank you for telling me, it took courage to bring that up, and the other person believing and saying, well, you're very welcome. Thank you for not flipping out. Thank you for, instead, you're welcoming my issue that I'm bringing to us. And then there'll be tears, because nobody expects this. People expect that if you do this too many, 5 or 10 times, you're going to have a divorce, and you're going to be at lawyers and dividing your children into weekend visits, because it's not that far. And sadly, I see it happen more, sometimes more younger families. It doesn't seem to matter. You can break up at the drop of a hat if you feel, because the language went the other way. It's like, don't put up with the shit, and don't put up with it 1 minute. And so it's not something you can say, thank you for telling me what's bothering you. It's, the conditioning is, I don't have to deal with this situation. It's completely different if you say, thank you for telling me. The other person says, you're welcome. And then you work on it. That's obviously going to be a bigger topic, but we may get to it in future podcasts of how you work on the issues.
Let me ask you a question. So what I'm hearing you say is like, we engender, help families embody this deep family paradigm as a concept, but you actually want them to embody it as a daily lived experience. How do you work with someone to make it a daily spiritual practice? Because I could see them saying, oh, that sounds wonderful, I love that. And then daily life occurs and they're caught up and they're stressed, they're running around. Like, how do you help them on a literally hour to basis operate from this space, from this heart space, really?
Yeah, my irony is it's very easy. And it's a blind spot in the spiritual teachers of the last 100 years in the West, at least. And that is just one small example. We can follow our breath because we've been trained. That took a long time. People will sit in a Zen retreat for 10 days and just breathe in and out. But what I'm saying is meditate on mitosis. Why was no one telling us to meditate on our actual cellular life that's happening every second? I find it unconscionable, if I can get a little bit riled up, that no one was willing to say the 3.8 million cell divisions of our actual life is not something for us to visualize, to be in awe of, and to feel in an erotic way, as sexuality is. But this is the division of your cells of your body, 3.8 million times per second. This we know is the case. But we've never been guided. When I tried to guide people in breathing meditation, nobody, or heartbeat, people couldn't find it. Now that's been taught, it's out 40, 50, 60 years. No one has done what I'm now talking about. So we're just at moment one. You're my audience, you're at ground zero. And I hope that of many things I was first to teach meditation in a prison, for example. That was really challenging back in the early 1970s. But this is the first moment of being permitted or guided in feeling mitosis. And I've done this for decades, it's bliss. I can tell you that right off the top. Feels every cell is quivering. What am I feeling? Energy, like people like to talk about energy. I find that to be a very shallow term. It's inanimate. It's not, life energy. It's a physics term. Mitosis is at least it's a biological term. And then it's one step further. It's a sexual, asexual, erotic dividing of cells over and over again. And what would that feel like? If you look at the ways that the chromosomes divide and spindle, and it's well worth looking on YouTube for the video animations of mitosis. And then you start to feel it in your body. You can feel it. Like I said, I've been practicing this meditation for 46 years. That was my luck. I had good teachers. They said, meditate on mitosis and then breath. But your breath is, what's a deeper mystery is how the breath energizes the cells so they grow and divide over and over again. The causal level, the Anandamaya Kosha, the causation of your body out of the mystery of chromosomes and stuff like that. So anyone can do what I just said, and you can access, and then meiosis is even deeper. Meiosis is the creation of sperm cells in ovulation, because those are special cells that can create new human beings. That'll be another podcast, but it's available. Women have periods, this we know. Men have a 20, 30, 46-day spermatogenetic cycle. Men should know this, but it's been hidden or not thought of being of importance. But in fact, it's easy to find references for this spermatogenetic cycle for men, like the ovulation cycle that women have done a great job in elevating it to something holy and beautiful as part of the human body. Men are, as sadly, can be behind the curve, slower at things. And so we're haven't even looked at spermatogenesis. But by doing so, yeah, you become even more aware of this fertility at the mystery, and it changes your consciousness. It's not just some simple little thing. If you could see all the trees breathing because you meditate on your breath, you'd be blown away too. But this is the living bodies brought to the foreground, and you interact with other people, husband and wife. Your cells change when you're in proximity. And when you're feeling the love feeling, your cells are all very, very happy. And so you start to feel it's always available to us.
What I'm imagining, it's at scale. So an individual could sit and meditate on cell division and or even the more surreal aspect of spermatogenesis or egg production. And as they do that, they can kind of go up the scale within their own body and go from the micro to the macro, and notice like the hormones that you mentioned in a previous podcast, the effects on the hormones on the heart and the brain system and the gut system, and then even scale out interpersonally, because then you can connect with another person and realize that what is happening inside you at these various scales is also happening inside of them, and how you show up in relationship to them has both an effect on what happens to you, is what I hear you saying, and also them. So you'd almost be charged with and I want to use the term obligation in a bad way, but with a respect, maybe. There might be a better way than obligation, to show up in that way, to recognize the holiness of what's going on inside of you and between you and this other person. And then creation of a new human being out of that if there's sexual intercourse.
Exactly. It's so easy to sort of describe it. I found no one who has been willing to describe it this way, particularly from the progressive or psychological side of the professions. And I'll make a claim, because the Indian yogas, one of their main axiom is the world is one family. If you were to put all this together, everyone would be perceiving everyone else at a genetic level. We have 46 chromosomes, is that right? Or 48, I can't remember. And so there's a species-wide identification. And I'll tell you, I'm Russian and Ukrainian. And that would not be happening in that right now with the simple living in the actuality of our chromosomal bodies, which are of one species and one family, all kinds of variations. Mm-hmm. But this is experienced like, oh yeah, Ukrainians breathe. I don't doubt that. Russians breathe, Americans breathe, everybody breathes. And you could lead a group at the UN, I suppose, everyone's breathing and they feel, oh, we're all one in the breath. But at this level of, we're all one at the level of our genetics, of our living cells. It's the result of the breathing. And then from that is likewise, the creation of families and of lineages. And it starts to change, that all of history looks like where there has been conflict has just been where people lost touch with what I have been sharing as deep family, in this case, deep world family.
Thank you, Stuart. Welcome to the Lifelong Love and Complete Maturation of the Ensouled Body teaching series with Dr. Stuart Sovatsky. I'm Michael Ostrolenk and I'm your host. These will be a series of short talks and dialogues with Stuart on his 50 years of lifelong love work. Today's first talk is entitled Energetic Voice Transmission. Over to you, Stuart.
Thank you, Michael, and welcome to everyone listening in. The podcasts so far have used mainly language and conveying ideas through words and trying to assemble those words in ways that made sense and introducing ideas that are really brand new. And so language is very good at that. But one thing it can't do is what we're going to get into now, which is direct vocal feeling communication. And I would add, in my case, from our previous topics, I have been living this deep family or this meditation on the actual living body of mitosis, the fertility body that keeps creating itself over and over again and in a blissful way. And so when I will chant, which is probably the good word, I'm going to chant with this instrument. I'll just give you a sample. Something new happens that you just had a little taste of. So for the rest of our podcast, I'm going to play this instrument called the shruti, which has a special purpose of creating an immense space, a space equally as large as an unabridged dictionary or a Library of Congress with millions or billions of books in it. We have this huge space that begins like this. And if we were to listen for an hour, we'd be in another room of this space. And in a week, we'd be in 5 or 20 different rooms. And then the vocalizations that I would be doing, the chanting from my body, which is, like I say, 45 or 50 years into a very specialized meditation that is both ancient and rare in modern times on fertility. Breath was interesting, but the cellular changes of fertility and of mitosis, meiosis were really foundational. So it's going to come through my voice, I hope. And you will know or feel as you believe, are willing to believe, or claim that you have experienced. And that's the purpose of the next 3 or 4 minutes of the transmission side of this podcast.
Welcome back to Energetic Voice Transmissions, Part 2 with Dr. Stuart Sovatsky. In Part 1, he explained this transmission process. We're going to encourage you to sit quietly, listen deeply, turn the music up, and feel how it affects you. Stuart?